Welcome back to Ask Dan Anything, and today we're going to be talking about relationships. And in particular, a issue a guy I know on the internet, Jorge, brought up that applies to many relationships with people who are into self-development. And that is, what happens when I'm working on myself, but they're not working on themselves, and we start to drift apart. I remember when I first saw this, I used to work in Department of Corrections, and I used to work with guys who had anger management issues. So I worked with guys who abused and hit their wives and partners. And so these guys would then go and do an anger management course. And it was a very effective course called Man Alive in West Auckland. It was very helpful. It was a 20-week course, and for some of these guys who graduated, it was life-changing. They went from being abusive to being finally managing their anger properly. But what happened often is because the wife was seen as the victim, she wasn't put on any course, she wasn't given any development to do, and a bitterness and a resentment would grow up from these partners. They would feel like, not only am I the victim of this crime, but he's the one who gets to grow and change and transform, and I have to hear about it while nothing's happening for me. This also comes, on a side note, that comes from the kind of delusional perspective on most domestic violence that it's only the guy. And the problem is the relationship itself. The guy is the one who can't manage violence. But the reason the violence occurs in the first place is because of the way the two partners conflict. And so the woman's not getting any assistance, and what will happen is quite often she would lash out. So she'd start provoking the guy and he would relapse. And I saw this pattern quite a lot, and it represents a pattern that we see in a lot of couples where one person's doing self-development and the other person's just living, the regular life, which there's nothing wrong with, is that there's a resentment. Usually it's the resentment on the side of the person doing the self-development that their partner isn't keeping up. But it can go both ways. It's like, why do you go off to these classes all the time? Why are you off doing these new things all the time without me? What's happening? So I wanted to share some insights as to how to manage this, because I think there's a few different ways to manage it. First and foremost is you have to understand people always change. We have this idealistic religious model of relationships where we believe that people will be pair bonded for life. That once you find someone you're in love with, it will remain that way for decades upon decades, through thick and thin. The very vows that we use in marriage imply that neither of us is going to change no matter what happens to us. And it is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. That's one thing you mean guaranteed is the person you marry today is not going to be the same person you're with in 20 years' time. That's a guarantee. So quite often the resentment comes from the idea that the person's changing, and because we love them, they shouldn't be changing, because we've been promised that the people we love will remain the same. But first we need to understand, you're never going to have your partner remain the same. They are going to change. Even if they're not into self-development, they're going to change. Their friends will influence them, they change a job, their careers, they're constantly going to be slightly shifting. And even if they resist change, they're going to basically be a different person every 10 years. So that's the only constant, accepting that the people you're with may change, and they may change so much that they're no longer someone you're in love with. And that's a possibility. Now, lifetime commitment doesn't align well. It restricts growth. It doesn't align well with self-development enthusiasts. And this is why I think a great approach to a relationship, which my girlfriend and I take, is we constantly revisit our connection. We check in all the time, and we constantly accept the belief that it may change. Whenever we talk about future plans, my girlfriend and I, almost always one of us will say, if we're still together, if we still love each other, we can do this, and if it works out for us, we'll do this. We never lose sight of the fact, even though we're coming up to about 2 years now, we never lose sight of the fact that no matter how long we've been together and how much we love each other now, there are no guarantees for the future. And because we constantly talk that way, it takes the pressure off, which I believe helps with resentment. If one of us is trying new things, there's always a little bit of bitterness and resentment on the other party's side, but we're able to quickly work through that because we accept that the person we're with isn't guaranteed to be the person we'll be with in the future. There's a selfishness in self-development, isn't there? A self-centered focus. And it doesn't have to be harmful to others, but it can be. There are some people who, when they get into self-development, they become obsessed and they actually neglect the other people in their life. And that's not the same as naturally growing apart. There are some, especially those who get into pseudo-spirituality, who will neglect their children, their partner, to go on retreats for months at a time and, to spend years in the garage meditating when, the other partner has to race around after the kids and do everything. That's not taking care of yourself. That's actually neglecting the value of compassion, and it's neglecting the commitments you've made. You might have to choose between the commitments you've made and the work you're doing on yourself, but make sure you do choose and don't do this half-assed both thing. If you want to meditate, then meditate. And if your love for it is so extreme that you cannot take care of your kids, then you need to start thinking about divorce. You need to be sure that the way you're working on yourself is not neglecting your life, because that would actually go against self-development. So if I want to get into something new, the key here is to involve the people in your life, to give them the best possible chance to support, encourage, and participate with you. And if they don't want to, at least then you've given it a shot. So if you're getting into something new, invite your partner along. Invite them to try things for themselves. Encourage them, and repeatedly do this. Keep doing it until it either brings you together or pushes you apart, or you find this third option where you work on things separately. So if you're working on self-development, you cannot expect your partner to change with you. And if your partner is developing themselves, you cannot expect them to stay the same. What you can do is invite each other to participate together or participate separately, and allow that to naturally either pull you together or push you apart. So I know that's not a clear answer where you can manipulate the partner into coming your way, but that's not the option. You can invite them to come with you. You can't make it happen. Alright, I hope that helps. If you guys have any questions about your relationships or your confidence, you want to send them through to dan@brojo.co.nz. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I'll see you guys next time.